At this point, it is no longer a secret what went down in the final game of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations. The game, which featured Senegal and host Morocco, was keenly contested and relatively quiet for the most part, but apparently it was saving all the drama for additional time in the second half, which made it one of the most dramatic major tournament finals we have ever seen. The many happenings in additional time culminated in a number of the Senegal players walking off the pitch in protest, only returning after some persuasion to finish the game they would go on to win. But were their actions justified? Were the Senegal players and staff right to do what they did? Should they go unpunished? If they shouldn't, what type and what gravity of punishment should be meted out to them? We'll attempt to answer all these questions in this video today.
Goal90 Shop, your one-stop solution for all your World Cup needs.
The first question to be answered though is this: why did Senegal do what they did? You see, in the build-up to the game there was a growing feeling that everything was going the way of the host at the 2025 AFCON. Most other participants had the feeling that everything was being done to crown the host champions for the first time in 50 years. And it surely didn't help that in each of Morocco's knockout games, against Tanzania, against Cameroon and against Nigeria, there were really huge shouts about bad refereeing calls in favour of the hosts. So Senegal came into that game super cautious and maybe a little paranoid. They came in anticipating some foul play from the hosts, so you could say that their guards were up from the very beginning. They even made some official complaints to CAF before the game about some things they felt were hindering them from having a fair and favourable preparation for the match, all of which we have already discussed in our previous video. So, all things being considered, with the game still goalless after 90 minutes and tension super high, Senegal felt a huge feeling of injustice when what they thought was a totally legal goal was disallowed in the second minute of added time. Achraf Hakimi and Abdoulaye Seck both had hands on each other in the build-up to the goal, so it should actually have been allowed to stand. But the referee's early whistle made it so that VAR could not even intervene in the cancellation of the goal, and that must have worsened the feeling of indignation for Senegal. But despite their grievances, they took what felt like a really heavy blow on the chin and got on with the game. But when the referee went to VAR just a few minutes later to award a penalty to Morocco, all hell broke loose. It was one thing to chalk off their additional time goal for a soft push, but to then go the other way and award the opponents an additional time penalty for a soft pull. Yeah, that was just too much for the Senegalese to take. The sense of injustice grew, and the coach made a very bold decision and ordered his players to walk off in protest. Most of the players complied, while some, particularly Sadio Mane, stayed back. Now, if all the players had walked off the pitch, it would have been an automatic forfeit and Morocco would have been handed the trophy by virtue of that. But Mane, who refused to walk off with the rest of the team, managed to convince his teammates to come back out and continue the game. Well, you know how the game went from there. Brahim Diaz made a total mess of the penalty, the game went to extra time, Pape Gueye scored in the 94th minute, and that was enough to win Senegal the trophy, their second ever AFCON title. So far, the only major punishment that has been meted out is a suspension to Pape Thiaw, the coach of the Senegal national team, for his role in the late drama in the final. But fans, journalists and enthusiasts have been asking if there should be more. A lot of folks argue that if nothing serious is done about this, it could set a terrible precedent. Players and coaches might feel like they can just walk off into the dressing room when a couple decisions don't go their way in a game. This could taint the image of the competition, deeply affect the integrity of the game, and turn football matches into a complete circus. Absolutely nobody needs that. For that reason, there have been suggestions that a punishment be meted out to the entire national team, and perhaps some heavier ones on some certain players for the role they played in the protest. Some have suggested a replay of the final would be the best solution. They say that the Senegalese players walking out should have forced the referee to blow the final whistle and award a walkover to the hosts. But in our opinion, the competition might feel like an even bigger circus show if a replay is actually ordered after a whole closing ceremony, and award presentation had already been done in the presence of both the CAF and FIFA presidents. So yeah, we would say that this is a totally unrealistic solution, but another suggestion is that Senegal be banned from participating in the next edition of the AFCON. which is scheduled to take place next year in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. It would be a massive blow to be without the defending champions and one of the giants of African football at the next AFCON, but it would surely send a strong message to any team harboring thoughts of pulling off something like this at the next edition or any after that. You just cannot do something like that and go unpunished. Another suggestion is for CAF to identify the players who actually walked out and suspend them for a period of time, along with the manager. Some say that players like Sadio Mane and Kalidou Koulibaly, who tried to keep the peace and maintain sanity, should not be punished for the sins of their teammates. Therefore, only those who were actually involved in the walkout should be punished. This way, every individual takes responsibility for his own actions and faces the necessary consequences. This would also mean that the whole nation doesn't have to suffer. Senegal can still feature at the next AFCON, but they would have to leave out those players who have been found guilty. But in all of this, there is a massive majority of folks who believe that Senegal were well within their rights to stage a protest, as the unjust decisions against them were just too blatant. In fact, many have applauded the bravery and courage of the players and staff to stand against apparent injustice in the most hostile environment. These folks have suggested that it is, in fact, the referees and the governing bodies who have to do better to uphold the integrity of the game. They believe that if the officiating is fairer and free of bias, we would not have to worry about players trying to stage walkouts like that. But then again, in spite of the refereeing decisions, if you tell players that they can just walk out of games when they don't like a decision, it sets the worst precedent. We might start seeing players randomly walk out of games at the AFCON for the silliest things, and that would absolutely tarnish the image of the competition. What happens when a strong but correct decision is given against a team and they just walk out because they don't like it? Who becomes the arbitrator in this case? Who determines what type of decisions warrant a walkout and what does not? It's just a very slippery slope. So, no matter what side of the divide you are on, you have to admit that it might not be the best decision for CAF to just let this one go. A statement has to be made with this particular situation to ensure that there is never a repeat of this. At the same time, we would say that it is also very important for the Confederation to look inward and fix a lot of things that need fixing. They must do better with officiating and make sure that hosts don't get undue advantage just because they are hosts. But we now want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Do you agree that Senegal should be punished for their walkout in the final? If you do, what kind of punishment would you say they deserve? If you insist they shouldn't be punished, feel free to tell us why in the comments. As always, this is a safe space, guys. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also, turn on the bell notification so you never miss out on new content. Catch you in the next one. Bye.